Everything we do starts with stakeholder drivers and needs. Now, the goals cascade starts here and it cascades to what we call enterprise goals. These generic enterprise goals then will map down into what we call alignment goals. Those alignment goals are what we used to call IT-related goals in older versions of COBIT, and those alignment goals will finally map down to what we call governance and management objectives. Of course, we'll cover this in a little bit more detail, but let's hit each one of these mappings more specifically. First, when we talk about stakeholder drivers and needs, there is not a specific mapping or a table from COBIT that tells you what your stakeholder drivers and needs are. These are things we need to understand at the enterprise level. Where COBIT starts and gives specific guidance is at the enterprise goals level. So these stakeholder needs have to be transformed into an actionable strategy. That goals cascade that we're looking at supports enterprise goals, which is one of the key design factors for a governance system. This supports the prioritization of management objectives and governance objectives based on the priority of your enterprise goals. So what do these enterprise goals look like? Well, you got them right here. There are 13 enterprise goals. What we see is EG01 through EG13. In this course, we're not going to be talking about specifically what each one of those is, but I want to orient you to how they're organized within the COBIT framework. First, you'll see that these are organized into what they call the BSC, or the Balanced Scorecard Dimensions. Each of these goals, each of these 13 generic enterprise goals, is associated with one of those dimensions of that scorecard. This ensures that we have all four perspectives covered and considered when we're determining proper goals and metrics. In addition to talking about balanced scorecard dimensions, each of those enterprise goals has a complement of metrics for every one of those. That tells you how well you are meeting that goal, of course, to help you align with the enterprise. And for example, here for EG02, managed business risk, we have percent of critical business objectives and services covered by risk assessment, the ratio of significant incidents that were not identified in risk assessments versus total incidents, and finally, the appropriate frequency of the update of my risk profile. So those are some examples, and each one of those 13 goals has a set of example metrics for you, and you can pick the ones that are most appropriate for you. Next, we map those enterprise goals into what are called alignment goals. Now, alignment goals emphasize the alignment of all of my IT efforts with business objectives. This is an updated term, but it also seeks to avoid this frequent misunderstanding that these goals indicate purely internal objectives of the IT department within the enterprise. Like enterprise goals, alignment goals have been consolidated, reduced, updated, and clarified where necessary from COBIT 5. Surprise, surprise, within those alignment goals, we'll see there are 13. And here are my 13 alignment goals. As we mentioned before, you see those alignment goals into a balanced scorecard dimension. And of course, each one of those identifies some sample metrics that you can use. Well, here's what the table looks like. This comes right out of COBIT 2019. You'll notice across the top we have EG01 through EG13. Those are my enterprise goals. This is the mapping from enterprise goals to alignment goals. Down the left-hand side, you see AG01 through AG13. Those are alignment goals, and we just saw what these looked like a few minutes ago. But what do these boxes mean that connect the lower level goal to the upper level goal? Well, first, we have what's called a primary relationship. You notice the darker blue boxes have a P in it. A P indicates the level of support between that alignment goal and the enterprise goal that is significant. Now, if that alignment goal is not met, here's how I look at it. This can have a primary effect on the enterprise goal being met. I would say if it's a primary, it's a showstopper. If alignment goal 01 does not get met, it's going to have a significant, if not a showstopper effect on enterprise goal number 3 being met. So those are the primary relationships. Let's take a look at what that secondary relationship actually means. Of course, these are in my words, but the secondary relationship says this level of support between that alignment goal and the enterprise goal is significant. However, if that alignment goal is not met, it can have an effect, but it's not going to be a showstopper for that enterprise goal. Now, again, you might be thinking these are a little bit vague, but you can modify these, and I'll show you how in a spreadsheet, which is also available to you as download. The third option we have is no relationship. Well, that says, hey, we haven't really identified a significant connection between the alignment goal and the enterprise goal. Now, you may in your organization, because remember, everybody has different cultures, we have different organizational structures, but within this model, there wasn't enough to identify it as a primary or secondary. Can you change that? Of course you can. So what we've just seen is this mapping from enterprise goals down to alignment goals. And what we want to do next is map our alignment goals down to what we call those governance and management objectives. There are 40 governance and management objectives in what we call the COBIT core in COBIT 2019, and let's see what those look like. I won't cover every one of these governance or management objectives in this course because that's covered in another one of our videos. But you'll see on the left-hand side, we have evaluate, direct, and monitor. That's my governance domain. It includes 5 governance objectives. To the right of that are what we call management objectives. Align, plan, and organize has 14 management objectives. Build, acquire, and implement has 11. Deliver service and support has 6 objectives. And monitor, evaluate, and assess has 4. This is what COBIT calls the core model, and it outlines those 40 governance or management objectives, each of which are associated with a process. To see what the mapping looks like for this, up on top we now see alignment goals. On the previous mapping, those were enterprise goals. We are now mapping our alignment goals down to those 40 governance and management objectives that you see on the left. Now, this does not show all 40 of those. It only goes down to BAI 02, but the same rules apply. If EDM 01 does not get met, it has a primary relationship with AG 01 or a secondary relationship with AG 02. With AG 04, it doesn't show a major effect, but of course you can have that in your organization if your culture and your structures require that. This is really neat. Think about what we've just done. We've taken 13 generic enterprise goals, we've mapped those to 13 alignment goals, and we've mapped those to 40 governance and management objectives. If you can figure out a way to determine which enterprise goals are most important to you or your specific organizational or enterprise goals are important, you can determine which of those 40 governance and management objectives you should be focusing on within the COBIT framework. Based on that, let's